Two of the Nammour Symposium. I'm Jeffrey D. Mason. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Letters. Philosophy is one of the 11 departments. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank especially Randy Mays for inviting me to come and introduce the first panel. As I was explaining to Chris Bellin, one of our other colleagues, this gives me an excuse to remember to show up. Otherwise, I sort of get caught behind my desk in my office, and days go by, and was the Nammour last week? So here I am. Randy has explained that even though the panelists, as you'll get to know them in a few minutes, certainly are successful in what you might regard as conventional terms. I believe 3 of the people in the panel either are attorneys or are attending law school, which I guess is sort of a benchmark of success in our society. But he said that they were really chosen for different reasons having to do with who they are and the experiences they've had. And I was intrigued by a remark that Randy made in the message he sent me inviting me to come and join you today. He said the participants in this panel are presenting themselves more as humans than philosophers. So I want especially my colleagues in the philosophy department to ponder what Randy might have meant by that distinction. I thought it was very interesting. And of course, I'll be thinking about that as I work with you. I was thinking about the theme of the symposium this year, success, and I think that's a really loaded word in our culture today. And I was trying to think what it might mean from my various perspectives. Here at the university, I think we tend to think of success mostly in terms of our students, and then we define that success most immediately and glibly, I guess, in terms of grades. What grade did someone earn? And if somebody earns an A, it's very easy to say, well, they were successful in that course. We sometimes look at it from a somewhat different point of view. They're successful if they showed up and did the work. Sometimes as faculty, that's really what we expect or hope for, and the implication being, of course, some of the students don't show up or don't do the work, and sometimes that leads very immediately to failure. Here at the university, we are more and more engaged in something called outcomes assessment, and we are starting to measure the success of programs, which of course involves the students, the faculty, the whole operation, in terms of those outcomes. And there's an ongoing, difficult, sometimes heated debate over how to define those outcomes, how to assess them, what it all means, what are the consequences. This is by no means something that's settled. So even in the university setting, there are multiple ways to assess success. We could go beyond graduation, commencement's coming in a few weeks, and assess success in terms of what happens to our students after they finish. Do they achieve their goals, or do they achieve goals that we deem appropriate or admirable? Now, my field is theater. I'm an actor, director, and playwright when I'm not caught in my office behind my desk. And we tend to define success in general terms in 2 different ways. There's artistic success, and then there's success at the box office. And those of us who achieved artistic success sometimes sneer at success at the box office as being the hallmark of rampant commercialism. And of course, we don't do that because we're so artistically successful. Sometimes, however, that's a smokescreen for only 5 people bought tickets last night. But it's a great show, and we have something really serious to say. And I'm not casting aspersions in that point of view because I've taken that point of view many times. And I, as many actors have done, have played to audiences of 10 or 15, even though we wish we had a full house, even if a full house is only 60 people. It's always fun, though, when you're playing to a full house of 1,000, and they're all out there in their seats next to each other responding to whatever you're doing. And commercial success, of course, is nothing to be sneezed at. Commercial success pays the bills. And it's nice to know that 1,000 people thought well enough of the show to shell out whatever it is. Even locally in non-professional theater in Sacramento, that's sometimes $22, $23 to see a show, which is not an insignificant amount of money for most of us. So commercial success can be meaningful and can be important. But I mention this because just in my world, in the theater, we have these 2 very different points of view, even though in the best of all possible worlds they come together. But I think to extend to another frame of reference, which I have, and which I'm sure some of you share, taking perhaps a different point of view on our students. Virtually every student on this campus is someone's child. If those of us who are parents think about our children's success, we might at certain points think in the terms of the academy, of the university, or of the business world. Did they go to college? Did they graduate? Did they do well? Did they get the kind of job we want? But I think many of us as parents at various points, sometimes while our children are young, but sometimes after they've grown up, think of it in somewhat different terms. Is my child happy? Is my child healthy? Sometimes that's the best you'd want at the moment, or sometimes the best you can hope for. Is my child safe? That can be very important. And I would suggest that some of us define success for our children sometimes in those terms. We think, well, okay, it would be great if my child graduated from college, or if my child went to law school, as some of our panelists did, or to medical school, or went into the academy, had a career as an academic or as a scholar. But there are days when, as parents, we will settle very happily for, is my child happy, healthy, safe? Are they content? And can I be content with what they are doing? That can be another definition of success. So without further ado, let me introduce the first of our panelists, John Pelican. I probably already mangled his name after asking 3 times how to pronounce it. John attended Sacramento State until 2005. He was a math major who minored in philosophy. He then transferred to UC Berkeley to complete his math degree. Right now, he's a web developer in San Jose, and I love this. He dedicates his free time to juggling, which is something that I teach on occasion, and to criticizing Platonism. Thank you very much.
Hello. So when I was asked by Randy Mays to talk about my ideas of success, I really had to sort of think back to, what was the first time when I really grappled with an idea of success in sort of a non-trivial way. And this was really, for me, probably late middle school or early high school, and the particular type of success was academic success, which is what I decided to focus on in this talk. So prior to college, for me, I would say that the time period was really characterized by inherited ideas about success. These weren't ideas that I, sat down and formulated. They were ones that were externally imposed and ones from my schools that I went to and my peers. Interestingly, not really my parents. My parents were very laid back about that sort of thing. And this wasn't really a problem early on. Elementary school and middle school, I was a very good student academically, but high school, it sort of became a problem. I was very privileged at that time, actually, so these things were more my fault than anyone else's, but some barriers to success that I experienced at that time included, indifference and, irreverence. Read as a stubborn resistance to authority. And in retrospect, I think there was a little bit of a lack of stimulation. I would call myself, at the time, a very selective student. And what I mean by that is I pretty much did what I wanted to do and didn't invest much time in the things that I probably should have been doing. I devoted a lot more time to personal interests and hobbies of mine, which at the time were things like radio technology, film, computer programming. I usually did this instead of homework. So I received, a lot of poor grades early on. One that's funny to me now is I got a D in Algebra 2, which I look back on with amusement. But it really forced me to reflect on what was important to me, investing my time in things that I felt were unimportant at the time for some possible but unknown future payoff, or investing my time into things that I felt were important then. And I continue to struggle with this. It's something that I come back to all the time. So I started high school on an honors track, but I got off of that junior year, which was an improvement because I just wasn't, putting the time in. I wasn't taking it seriously. And I think, from that I developed some self-confidence issues that would last a lot longer than I expected, even though I kind of thought that the system was stupid. By senior year, I was pretty much tired of high school. I was just kind of checked out. I didn't have great prospects about what my future was because I didn't know what the causal implications of that would be over time. I'm proud to say I made the, might not graduate list. And around this time, junior and senior year in high school, there's this question going around, which is, what are you going to do for college? And that was a really difficult question for me because I didn't have a plan at all, and I didn't really feel that I was academically or emotionally really ready to study at a university, to move away from home, all of the implications that come with that. So I actually got really tired of this question. I started dreading interaction with anybody who might ask it, like doctors and dental hygienists and checkers at the grocery store. I mean, it was like everywhere you went, this was the question that people were asking. I had vague thoughts about software development as a career, but I didn't really have any idea how to facilitate that. So my mom suggested, why not just as one option, Sac State early enrollment. So we did that, and I remember going there and the guy looking over my transcript and kind of, being a little bit shocked by the kind of bipolar distribution of grades, and but he let me in. So at this time, there was kind of a seedling of hope, amidst the general negative feelings about high school. Somehow I got the idea that I wanted to study mathematics, and I don't remember exactly why. Looking back, I'm actually surprised that I didn't study computer science because I was into computer programming. So I decided to retake Algebra 2. I took that in the summer between my junior and senior year, and I did well that time, got an A+. And then I took pre-calculus senior year, and I enjoyed both of those. And I got my stuff together just barely enough to graduate. And I decided I was going to study mathematics at Sac State. That was my plan. So coming to Sac State was really a wonderful experience for me starting college. I found it extremely refreshing to finally be able to engage in academics and still be treated like an adult, which is something that I didn't feel that I had before. And I really began to see myself in a new light, and I started nurturing the idea that, perhaps I could possibly be academically successful despite my history. Perhaps the standards for success that existed at my high school were just that. So I really had a lot of influential professors and classes, and I don't have time to talk about them all, but I wanted to mention a few. My freshman year, I had in the math department Professor Ketching Zhu for calculus my first semester. And he's still one of the best, if not the best, mathematics expositors or lecturers that I've encountered either here or at Berkeley. He was really encouraging and supportive early on. He noticed that I had really high standards. I always wanted to get perfect scores on the exams. So after I did that a few times, he would always encourage me to continue that. He also gave me additional problems outside of the normal workload, including trying to prove, some of the theorems in the book. So he was really helpful early on, and he actually was one of the first to encourage me to think about transferring. Another professor who was very influential early on was Professor Matt McCormick in the philosophy department. I had him my first semester freshman year for critical thinking. And that class was interesting, but what was really important about it is that's where he suggested that I take philosophy of religion with him next semester. So I took philosophy of religion with McCormick, and this was like a really important class for me. It was my first deep engagement with analytical thought and writing in philosophy, and it was a very compelling subject matter for me. It was something that I'd really craved for years, but I didn't really know it. Because that type of writing and that approach just wasn't something that was done in my high school. I discovered actually the tendencies which were discouraged in my high school writing classes were encouraged and actually very successful in a philosophy of course. This was also personally important to me because it was my first exposure to a philosopher who would be very influential, John Leslie Mackey, J.L. Mackey. So I remember reading his little article, Evil and Omnipotence, which was just an assigned reading, but I was immediately impressed by his philosophical rigor, his subtlety, his eloquence, and I immediately began reading everything of his that I could get my hands on, which included 6 books and 2 books of collected papers and various papers that I could find online. I just totally wanted to read all of his stuff. I was heavily influenced by his general approach to breaking down problems, which you can see if you read all of his work. There's a common approach, and the distinctions he would make and his style and all of that. So this is relevant to my sort of developing ideas about success, among other things. Because Mackey is well known for, in meta-ethics and aesthetics, taking the position that there are no objectively prescriptive values. These sorts of things just don't exist in the world. So in particular, there are no objectively prescriptive values for success. There's no objective standards for success. He was very careful to make an important distinction between the choosing of standards, which is always going to be ultimately arbitrary, and the meeting of standards once you've chosen them, which is going to be an objective empirical matter, assuming those standards are sufficiently well defined. So this really resonated well with me. It was very appropriate timing for me to be reading that sort of thing. I continued studying philosophy of religion by myself after this course was over. I read a variety of material and had email conversations with philosophers that I enjoyed, and I managed to get a paper published in Stanford's undergraduate journal, which was fun. Anyway, around this time, towards my second year in Berkeley, I was sort of starting to play with this idea of transferring. And I sort of had my sights set on Berkeley. I really was looking for a more challenging curriculum in mathematics. And I also wanted to study certain subjects that weren't available at Sac State, at the time at least. I also, socially, I wanted a slightly less conservative environment, get me a little bit closer to San Francisco. But it was a difficult decision because I still had, lingering self-confidence issues. And it's kind of an odd thing when you bring up that idea. Certain people will respond in different ways. I think everybody I spoke to meant well, but I got some really weird advice, like, oh, you don't want to do that. It's going to be too competitive. The professors won't care about you. You might get lost. I still don't know what that means. You might go crazy. But I was encouraged by multiple professors who knew me well, and when I was accepted, I ultimately decided to go. So at Berkeley, I really enjoyed the challenge of the curriculum. I also enjoyed topics in the foundations of mathematics, which ultimately became my main interest and hadn't been available at Sac State, like mathematical logic, recursion theory, set theory, model theory. And I really enjoyed the environment. This time period was different because it was really characterized by me very explicitly defining what my standards for success were, and doing just enough other hoop jumping to kind of sustain the adventure. In my mind, I was there to study mathematics and a little bit of philosophy, and to do well in these courses, but I was not there to do other things. Almost all of my other required classes I took pass-fail because Berkeley lets you do that up to a certain amount of courses. And doing well in these courses just wasn't part of my definition for success. And I was perfectly comfortable with this, which is a large contrast to how I felt in high school when I wasn't doing well in certain things. This was fine. So I think after coming to Berkeley, having gone to Berkeley and done well there, I learned that it was possible for me to be successful at some things despite having a bad start, and also that it was okay for certain things to fall entirely outside of my domain of success. Post-college, which is now for me a few years out, I'm still really working out my ideas of success. I don't have like a definition or something that I'm totally happy with yet. While working, I continually come back to, as I said, the question that I struggled with in high school, which is how do you find that balance between, an investment of time in things that are prudent but might make you miserable and things that you enjoy. I am often surprised, perhaps now more than before, at how much of our culture with, institutions and jobs and the life planning that you're supposed to do is structured around, sort of work now, play later ideology of virtue and success, where work usually means suffer. And, which on closer inspection I think is just complete nonsense. And, but the most I can say right now is that, important standards for me for success include finding very meaningful and stimulating engagements both inside and outside of work. So in conclusion, I would say that I think my experience, hasn't given me yet a very concrete, definition of success that adopting, but it has helped me to be more comfortable in trying to explicitly define what my standards are, and in trying to work towards those. So if any of you are in anywhat of a similar position, I would just say choose your standards carefully. Thank you.
We're still actually waiting. I think, Chris, you're not out there, are you? We're waiting for one more panelist, but that's just fine. We're going to proceed. Our next guest is Lance Kennicks. Give him
Didn't realize there'd be another laptop up here, but I'll try to squeeze in. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Oh. So my parents impressed upon me the importance of generational progress. From an early age, they told me how much it meant to them to be able to build upon the achievements of their parents, and how important it is that I, along with my siblings, achieve and succeed more than they did. Both of my parents are college graduates, though neither had a parent complete the 10th grade. My mother and father are homeowners and are pretty much assured of comfortable retirements after long careers working for school districts and the state, respectively. In the midst of a recession, it looks as if today's young adults will be a generation that fails to live at the standard of living enjoyed by their predecessors. I'm in law school now. I'll graduate with a ton of debt and in a job market that will only take the best of us. As a result, I'll have to redefine success if I am to be successful to the extent that my parents and I want, and that is surpassing them. And the philosophy department has already helped me begin. With all of the comforts that my parents have been able to provide, many times I still felt like I lacked guidance in a couple of important aspects of life. My folks divorced when I was 4. Many times my mother seemed stressed out. My father never gave the impression that he actually liked his job. And both at times seemed lonely, and relationships within the family suffered. This philosophy department has given me the tools I need to actually enjoy life more than did my parents, regardless of how much or how little I earn. Because of that, I'll feel successful. My parents will be proud of my unique achievement in that, and my children, hopefully, will benefit in ways that I can't yet know. So 2 ways really stand out for how this department really helped me. First, I was hesitant about actually majoring in philosophy, and had I not had a good teacher giving me my introduction, I wouldn't have stayed with it. That teacher is Dave Denman. Does he still lecture here? Okay. And I actually had him at Sierra College, but yeah, he's here. If you're taking critical thinking, I recommend him. So everyone in this room knows that the pay wasn't attracting me to philosophy, and his class gave me the courage to do something unconventional and somewhat unemployable, and actually do what I want to do, which is something I don't think either of my parents actually did. Second, in this department, as opposed to others, I couldn't write a paper, the propositions of which I didn't actually believe. As a result, I had to think about what it was I did believe, my reasons for believing it, and whether those reasons were reliable indicators of truth. When I applied this process to thinking about my own life, I've been able to consider future consequences, the possibilities of the unknown, and excuse me, and more effectively predict what will make me happy and act accordingly. Without this practice, maybe I would have earned more money or had to attend less school, but then I'd be just like my parents. Philosophy has helped me to define success as having a balance between peace and purpose. The purpose of fostering good relations with others and treating them as I ought to. The purpose of being an example in my community. The external peace that comes from treating others right, and the internal peace from knowing that I'm doing the right thing. So thank you to the philosophy department, and I know those ideas are really broad. So if you have any questions about specifically what it was I learned, who I talked to, I'd be happy to answer them.
Our next panelist is Rachel Lampkin.
Hi, you guys. We only have 86,400 seconds in a day, so thank you for spending some of those seconds with me. Randy Mays was favorite's probably not a fair word. I remember sitting in Randy Mays' classes and being so thrilled and so excited to be there and feeling like I can't believe I get to hear this man think and speak. So philosophy of science, epistemology with Randy Mays, you got to do it. Blow your mind. I'm going to talk a little bit about the precursor to success, and that is ambition. And I think if there's one word that people would use to describe me that they would say to my face my whole life, that would be ambitious. I have been driven to be the best at whatever I was doing, whether it was screwing up or succeeding. I was going to absolutely be the best at it. I want to start this story with my junior year at Mills College. I had a full scholarship to Mills College. I was Palladium, which is valedictorian at Mills the junior year, and I was miserable. I wish I had then sort of the philosophical framework or structure to figure out why I was miserable. The structure that I'm currently using to guide how I evaluate success was developed by Daniel Kahneman. He's the father of behavioral finance, behavioral economics, and has won the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. And what he talks about is this notion of two selves, the remembering self and the experiencing self. I think by remembering self, he actually means evaluative self, because memories are actually experiences as well. I think he means evaluative or judging self, but he's smarter than me, so maybe he chose the word he meant. Anyway, if you think about life, he says we live our life in service to the remembering or evaluative self. And we drag our experiencing self through experiences it doesn't need or want in service of this evaluative self. And that's what I've done my whole life, right? So I'm at Mills. I'd already been a professional athlete. Was one of the fastest runners on the cross-country team, one of the fastest people on the lightweight 4 crew team. I considered myself the leanest girl there, which was very important to me at the time, and I was getting the best grades. Miserable. My evaluative self, my remembering self, was totally pleased. I was the bomb, right? My experiencing self was complete. In fact, I left. That's how I ended up at Sac State. Now, part of the problem was I was at Mills, right? I'm first-generation college. My high school GPA was a 1.55. Do you know how bad you have to screw up to get a 1.55 in a public high school? Successful at whatever I do. Anyway, through a long series of events, I end up getting straight A's in junior college, get a full scholarship to Mills College, and I thought, right, my evaluating self thought, when I got to Mills, there was just going to be smart people, attractive, skinny, smart people everywhere talking about important things, and most of them were going to be gay, right? Because I was gay, and Mills College is all women's college. I thought, right on. Gay as hell. Turns out they were gay, but they weren't gay like I was gay. And they hated me. My nickname was Barbie. At Mills, you were not allowed to be a girl-looking lesbian, right? Bizarre. And the reason I bring this up is when you are now making decisions about what you're going to do next, Go figure out what it's going to feel like. Go visit the graduate school, take a tour in one of the law firms. Go see what it's going to feel like before your evaluative self decides that's where you should go. So I get to Sac State, graduate, go to law school, graduate at the top of my law school, end up at the #1 patent litigation boutique in the world, making a ton of money. I'm the bomb again, right? You work, I billed 3,000 hours my second year there. It means I billed 10 hours a day, 30 days a week. My experiencing self was getting drugged through. I am not having a good time, but I'm the bomb, right? Then this sort of interesting event happened. I had stage 4 cancer, and the doctor sat me down. He said, "We don't think you're going to make it." And I hope I can translate this moment when you have worked your whole life to overcome being poor, to overcome being gay, to finally be the bomb, and somebody tells you you're going to die of cancer as a young woman. I was pissed. I mean, how could you get any more not fair? You shouldn't have to be gay and get cancer. There should be like a universal rule, right? One or the other, not both. But gay, poor, and cancer, whatever. So we searched really hard to find the best cancer specialist in the world because I just wasn't going to die, straight up. So I found an oncologist here in Sacramento, Joseph Toscano, who sat me down, told my whole family, we're not going to let her die. Wasn't really that easy, 6 months of chemo and not a good time. My experiencing self, once again, not having a good time. And the interesting thing is, everything I've done, even trying to live, even fighting for my life, was in service of this ambition of greatness, right? I could barely walk. I was bald, really, really, really scary looking. And I would go to the Sac City Stadium and walk step by step up the stadium because I was going to be tough and I was going to win, just in constant service of this ambition. When we realized I was going to live, while I still was in chemo and still had cancer, I asked my law firm if I could come back to work, if I could work part-time. Stupid. Where were the people in my life that should have had me? Oh, there's my dad. You tried to tell me not to do that, didn't you? I don't listen very well. So I go back to work. I beat the cancer. I go back to work. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking about these ambitions, right? I know how short life is. I know how many seconds I have in a day. I think when you're young, I never thought about death, other than Soren Kierkegaard's The Sickness Unto Death. Don't read that. I never thought about death. It was never going to happen. And now I realized, first of all, I had a 50% chance. I still have a 50% chance of the cancer coming back. So my minutes I'm extremely aware of, at least until August 2nd. And I started really thinking about which self should I be in service to? My experiencing self or my evaluative self? I don't know the answer yet because I don't know that you can that it's mutable. I don't know if your judging self has that big a range, but I'd like to try to move it. I mean, one of my ambitions now is to be less ambitious, right? So then a final event that I want to share with you is in 2009, I fell in love for the first time. I never really had time for that. I might as well want to date somebody hot, but I wanted you to go home in the morning because I had stuff to do. And I fell in love for the first time. And it really it messed with me. I could feel it happening to me, and I felt like someone was pushing me around, you know? Anyway, it happened anyway. She's here. It's the beautiful blonde in the front. And what happens to the experiencing self for me when that occurred, and I'm sorry to bring up something so mushy in a philosophy symposium, but I think it has a place here, properly structured. And that is when all of a sudden your non-work life becomes as important to you as your work life, there's a shift. Nothing had ever been more important to me than success, either in athletics, right? And I had to get a national record, a state record in 2 different sports, right? Nothing had ever mattered to me as much as being successful. And then all of a sudden you almost die and you fall in love. I think that offers a unique perspective to talk about something more important than ambition and success. So we made a decision to move to San Francisco, and I started working for a law firm that wasn't the #1 litigation firm in the country. And that was painful. It's painful. It's physically painful. Every time someone asks where I work and I say that name now, it's physically painful. I still make 4 times the average of the salary in this country. I still work at a prestigious law firm. In fact, it was just in Forbes magazine, but it's not the #1 law firm. So how do you think about these things? As you guys are trying to think about your decisions moving forward, I strongly encourage you to sort of think about which self you're living life in service of. And I don't have the answer. I don't know which self you should live your life in service of. I have a guess now. I have a guess that if you live your life in terms of the experiencing self and try to temper the judging self, you're going to have many more good moments. The criticism of that is, how do you make it not collapse into hedonism? Right? I think there's a slippery slope. If you start collapsing that into hedonism, well, heck, I'm just going to drink all day, have sex, whatever. I don't think that works on a long term. You have to set this experiencing self up for long-term enjoyment. So unfortunately, I still think you have to get a good job. I still think you have to work hard. But currently, what I'm working on now is getting the judging self to back up a little bit and let the experiencing self have a little more fun. Thank you.
So that's the kind of people we make here. Could we get the stage lights on? Does anybody know how to do that back there, or do I have to come back and do it? Is that all right? There we go. Great. Rachel mentioned Daniel Kahneman. That's Kahnemann, or just one N. He really is one of the great sages of our time, and if that's piqued your interest, there's a website that many of you know about called TED, T-E-D, and he just recently gave a beautiful 20-minute account of the distinction that she used in from his work, and it's called The Riddle of Experience. So if you Google TED, The Riddle of Experience, that's another 20 minutes well worth spending. So our fourth panelist hasn't arrived, and I'm not sure why that is yet. I knew that he was going to be running late, but what we'll do is go ahead and start the question and answer session. And if he's able to show up, then we'll work his presentation in as well. Okay, and I'll moderate the discussion. So does anybody have a question they'd like to start with? Yes, Clifford.
To or either been in law school or in law school, could you comment on law school experience? Was it a good experience or a bad one?
We'll both go probably. A lot of students go to law school because they think it's going to be really intellectually stimulating. They'll make a ton of money when they get out, and it's kind of sexy, and you have succeeded at almost anyone's mind. You better want to work really hard for the rest of your life. You better feel okay with being around people that will talk down to you. When you get to a law firm, there's a structured hierarchy. The partner is the boss, and you are pawn scum. And you better be prepared to treat them like that. And by the way, in law school, there's the top of the class, and then there's pawn scum. And it's just the reality of it. Now, if you love critical thinking, if you're a competitive person, and you don't mind working hard, 100% it's the way to go.
I'm actually having more fun than I've ever had. I hope I'm not looking down on anybody while I'm there, but part of that is, goes to what I was saying, about this peace and this purpose. Before I went and I was just working, I really felt like I wasn't doing anything with myself, and so lacking a purpose, I didn't have peace either. And so since I've been in law school, I mean, I sleep better actually, maybe because I'm just so exhausted at the end of the day. But I'm really just enjoying myself. I've met a lot of people for the first time, maybe not the first time, who are really like-minded. Like you said, being committed to working hard. I like that. I like the idea of one day finding a job that I can really invest myself into. Maybe because I just agree with what the firm or what the institution stands for or something. But I feel like before law school, I wasn't prepared to be employed there anyways. So I really like law school.
Question for Mr. Pence. You were talking about intergenerational success and building on success. Your grandparents came back to high school, your parents went to college, and now you're in law school. I'm curious if you have thoughts on visions of success for your children. I mean, what do you imagine success will look like for them?
I've put some thought into it, not a whole lot. My mother, was really big on being able to, make sure we always had a place to stay. So home ownership, I guess I would like to be able to leave for my children one day a career. I don't know. Some way of saying, hey, go ahead and take chances. And if whatever your dreams fall through, you still got this safety net. And for them, I think their vision of success and for their children would be just kind of building this bank of knowledge so that the lessons I learned, my parents learned, that they're not forgotten and we don't have to repeat the same mistakes all the time. Whatever the fruits of that are, I would call that success.
How important do each of you believe it to be that you plan going into a period of your life? And how important do you think it is to pretty much make stuff up as you go?
John, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess, not really a controversial answer. I mean, just a balance of both would be important to me. I definitely know in my past that things did come about that weren't the result of a plan that were good. So I wouldn't want to be so committed to one that it excludes good things that come along. But having some sort of structure is also useful to work in.
I'm a heavy-duty empiricist. I don't think that you have to have a plan, but I think you have to have a system and a way to decide whether or not what you're doing is working, right? Because I think we have a tendency to over-evaluate how happy we are or how things are going. So, for example, I'm a firm believer in journaling in a structured way, not, oh, I had cake for lunch, whatever, but actually in a structured way so that you know when you look back on it whether or not the decisions you're making are resulting in the things you want, whether it's more success or more happiness or more money or whatever it is. You have a way to evaluate how it's going.
I think I made a point about being an example in my community, and at least a lot of my peers. I also used to teach high school. A lot of my students just continuously acted without a plan, and so I think in as much as I act with a plan, even if it's a bad one, I think I serve as an example to people. Hey, really put some thought into things before you actually do them. But I can't turn down a good time if one just pops up out of nowhere.
I'm curious. I'm sorry I don't remember anybody's name.
Lance, Kenneth, John Peliquin, Rachel Lamb.
Rachel. Okay, Rachel, I have a question for you. based on what you now understand as the difference between your evaluating self and your experiencing self, and how you dragged yourself through all these miserable experiences, based on that, if you could go back, would you have done anything? Would you have done it differently?
Everything.
So you would be willing from where you are to just throw everything you did, like just have it be gone?
I don't know that those two, I don't think that's the same two questions. I do think that, in service of the need to be the best, I went through a lot of things that didn't get me where I wanted. Ultimately, I think, and again, I have a very, that's why Daniel Kahneman is so amazing to me, because he applies rigorous empiricism to some of the questions that have bothered us in philosophy and psychology. So I don't know why I was born with the need, or not born, developed, who knows, and maybe when you grow up gay and poor, all of a sudden you have to prove yourself more. I don't know where that comes from. But if I could have backed down the evaluating self sooner, I think that would have resulted in a better and a happier life. And I also think I would have been more successful. I think that like leaving Mills, for example, that's a blown it thing to do, right? I have a full scholarship at a very respected college, and I bailed. And I think that one of the reasons that I bailed is because of this disjunct, this conflict between the experiencing self and the evaluative self. And I wish I would have had these tools sooner. But I certainly think that I would have had more fun, and I think that I would have ultimately been more successful without that conflict.
But Rachel, to follow up on what Carol asked, I mean, it was your experiencing self that wasn't happy here, and then you conclude by saying that one of the mistakes was not to pay enough attention to it.
I think it's a really good question, Randy. I don't know that it's that simple, but I also think you can't put either self. Remember saying I thought that the judging self might not be that mutable? You can't work against one of those selves too much either. So my life has been really happy, but I pinpointed the key critical decision points, and to have an experiencing self that's so tortured, right? I mean, to finally go to a college that's predominantly lesbian and not be liked by them, right? And to be getting incredible grades and be one of the fastest runners on the team and not be liked by the team. Now, I provoked them. I used to wear this T-shirt that says "Second was the first loser." Now, and it's a very liberal college, and I would wear red, white, and blue running clothes. There is a sense that I goaded them as well. But I think you have to understand your experiencing self and your evaluative self. And you can't work against either one to such an extreme. Who knows? I'm just trying to figure it out. But maybe you guys can figure out the email me.
John, do you want to address Carol's question at all?
I actually had some similar experiences to Rachel. My first college, I was on a full scholarship. I went to West Point. I wrestled there, and I did a fairly good job of earning the respect of my peers, though. But I definitely had that tension between, I hate this, and my life is going to be set when I leave. Boy, how did that work out? I think because we both wanted to find that balance, it really was ultimately important for me to leave, because just at that institution, you weren't going to be able to determine your own balance. Somebody was going to tell you what the balance was. And that was just probably the wrong place for me. But yeah, you definitely do have to keep fine-tuning it as you go.
With respect to the question about changing things in hindsight, I really wouldn't. I wouldn't change the way that I did it. I think I gained a valuable perspective by kind of going through a non-standard route. I think people can get too caught up in that, you're only going to be able to achieve some sort of success through a certain path. And I think it was really valuable to just do a different path. And, a lot of my friends too, one friend I made at Berkeley had worked in software for 10 years without a degree, and then came back and got his degree, and now he's working at Amazon. And, I've always found that, that I've always felt rather that you don't need to always, go through the pre-established channels, and I think my experience kind of confirmed that a little bit. So I would.
If I may, I'd like to ask each of you your views in regards to a thesis that was defended by one of our speakers yesterday concerning the glory and the goodness of failure. To what extent do each of you see failure as, in some respect, some significant and meaningful respect, good?
I know people have, because so many good things came out of my having cancer, a lot of people have said, well, then don't you see it as a blessing? Try not to cuss at them. I don't know, it's almost like La Fontaine's fox, right? I don't know that we need to, and I didn't hear the speaker, so this is true. I don't know that everything has to be good. Sometimes bad things happen. People get cancer, people fail, and you just try to get up, dust yourself off, and keep going. But I don't know that I find, and maybe it's my personal bias, I don't know that you can find lessons in failure. You can learn from failure. But I would say that failure itself is a good.
I'm not familiar with the speaker that you're talking about either, so this question is kind of general, but I don't know. I guess it's all, to me, it would be a matter of degree. I mean, I think looking back at my own experience, sometimes I was right on the brink of something that I think would have been, a much harder to correct failure that may have just introduced a lot of baggage and overhead to correct that wouldn't have really helped me learn much more than something that was a little bit less of a failure. So I think it just all needs to be tempered. To what degree?
I don't think it's either good or bad. Failure is just a fact of life. And being that, it serves a function outside of itself, outside of the person who feels the failure. Maybe somebody else comes and learns from it, whether or not it's the person experiencing the failure. The doctor who fails in treating a patient, maybe another doctor or another patient benefits from it. And it sucks, having to experience failure, but I can't really call it bad or good.
One more quick thing on that. I think it's important to remember we're all going to do it. My kickboxing coach, it's sort of corny, but my kickboxing coach said, champions get knocked, or everyone gets knocked down. Champions get up. And I think it's really important to realize, I'm sorry guys, you're going to fail. You're going to fail at something. We all fail. The best of us fail. You got to get up.
I'm just curious to hear whether any of the members on the panel would say that any parts of their experience involved accepting a standard from someone else about what success is that you did not initially think was the correct standard, but then through your experiences or through just working at it or whatever, you ended up thinking, yeah, this standard has something to it, whether it was a parent or an institution or a friend or whatever.
Here, Russell's question is, did you initially reject the standard that you came to accept or see the wisdom in later? I think that was directed at all.
I think if you take somebody else's standard, you kind of have to be like them. And just as that's impossible, I think for a standard to function for you, you've got to set it yourself. Even if I do end up living to be just like my dad or whatever, we're going to differ in some respect. And so I'm not living up to my dad's standard in that way. So I have to set it for myself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, like I said in my speech, I wasn't into the high school standards at all, and I think probably now I might be a little more so. I mean, I was very impatient at that time, and I had a very narrow idea of the things that I wanted to study and the things that I didn't, and I pretty much didn't focus on any of the things that I didn't want to. And I realize now that that was probably kind of dumb. I mean, there's a certain amount of well-roundedness implicit in the curriculum that you should just do. My conclusion is that it's okay that they required me to do that, and it's okay that I was miserable with that at the time. But still, it was probably something I should have paid more attention to. So, that was a standard that I definitely initially rejected, and nowadays I would, like for example, if I had a kid, not that I want to, but and they were complaining, if they were in my situation, and it was high school time, and they were complaining about these courses, would I say, oh, well, yeah, just don't do them? Probably not.
It's terrible. You didn't say it anyway.
No, man, I would tell them not to ignore those courses.
Oh.
I would tell them not to do what I did, because I think that you should go ahead and just be forced to do some stuff. And it's okay if you're miserable.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack at answering your question. There's a thinker, Martin Seligman, who started out in philosophy, but now he's studying what he calls the philosophy of happiness, but I think it's psychology, but it's empiricist psychology. And he sort of outlined some of the key things that studies have shown us make people happier, right? $60,000 a year is a minimum. Being around people that you enjoy their company, long-term marriage, some of these things that sort of found empirically work. And one of the things that work are to be the most successful person that you know. And so he recommends to be happy that you hang out with people with lower standards in life than you. So I think that there's something to be said for that. I'm only partly kidding.
Jeremy?
I was wondering if three of you could help us sell philosophy to the young minds that are assembled here today, and maybe just detail 1 to 3 specific things that you think philosophy gave you that were instrumental in your success and where you've gone and where you hope to go, that would maybe help them to think if they're contemplating about whether or not to do this crazy thing and minor in philosophy, major in philosophy, how they're going to tell their parents about that. Give them some advice here, give them some sense of what they could get from them making that decision and following in your footsteps in that way.
If I could amend that in a friendly way, maybe it's not entirely friendly, feel free to include things that you hope philosophy would deliver and didn't.
Sure.
We can take that. Can't be helpful.
You asked me if I would do things over. Honestly, one thing I wouldn't do over is I would still major or study philosophy, major and study philosophy. As long as I checked out what I was going to do after and made sure that I could fill in those classes. Because one thing I think we all need, what was it? Man lives a life of quiet desperation. One thing we all need is a structure, a framework to think about our lives and how we're going to make decisions in our lives. And I think philosophy is one of the best things to do that. One thing that I would like to see is less of the traditional types of classes, European philosophy from the 1820, I'm sorry. But how about having some behavioral finance, some of those kind of courseworks? Or if you're going to go on to graduate school in economics, philosophy is great. Just make sure you can also take the math and economics. If you're going to go on to law school, philosophy is great. If you're on to medical school, for many medical school programs, philosophy is great. If you want to go to work right after law school, right after college, I can't imagine what you'd do with it and still make the $60,000 a year necessary for happiness.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer your question since I majored in math, but maybe I'm better to answer
Minoring
Ryan's.
in philosophy as well.
Okay, minor. Yeah, I mean, obviously, just to preface it, I definitely love philosophy. I mean, from the first time I was exposed to it, as I mentioned in my presentation, I mean, it filled a niche and it satisfied something I've craved for a really long time, which is that sort of, at least the type of philosophy I like, which is, very analytical. I mean, the reason why, I guess if I had to complain about one thing, and the reason why I sort of gravitated to math as a focus is just that in math there's a very clearly defined standard of whether you've done it well or not. There's a very clearly defined standard for mathematical proof.
You avoided using the word success there, and it seemed like the perfect word.
Okay. I just want to change it up a little. No, but there's a very rigorous standard for proof, and you can look at your work, and I mean, assuming we're not talking about minor errors, you know if you've done well or not. I can't say the same thing with a philosophy paper necessarily. Depending on who you give it to, and the particular standards by which they're looking at it. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't, and I guess I really like that added rigor and that added set of standards in
I've taken an interest in criminal law and criminal justice system, and I wish we had an ethics course related to that. Looking at a lot of my peers in school, I just can't believe that they were able to graduate and go to law school without taking an ethics course. But I think other than that, the philosophy department gave me exactly what I wanted. I think for people who are concerned about, employment later, the 60,000, maybe, I know it's already a kind of a small major. If it were easier to kind of stick it onto something else as a double major, I think that might help the department. In fact, if I could go do undergrad all over again, I would probably double major, definitely philosophy, but something else also.
Any students with questions? We've been having mostly professors here. Students asking students, seems like a fantastic idea.
Anybody trying to go to law school? No? Really helps on the LSAT.
Yeah. I came a little bit late. I wanted to know where you're going to law school. I don't know if you said that earlier.
UC Hastings.
Oh, nice.
It's an unattached law school in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. That's where my boss went.
I liked it.
Other questions?
Alex? It might be a little bit of an invasive question, I don't know.
Invasive question from Alex.
Original plans, because both, you had initiatives and then you talked about it later, but you were unhappy going to Mill and West Point. And I don't know, it's just, it doesn't seem like, I'm just kind of how you I don't understand how you be in a position where you, not be happy where you were. I don't know, how you could, go to someplace that's just, oh, this is going to be great, and then it not be great. I don't know if it's just because either I make always awesome choices, or I am fantastic at coping with things. Oh, this is a terrible choice, but I'm going to make the best of it anyway. So I don't know what that kind of mindset is like. I was wondering if you could expose on it. Why you were miserable and why things didn't work out.
I might have just been a miserable person before I went. I don't know. Just felt like I didn't want to do anything. I definitely knew I wasn't at my best there. Wasn't getting anything out of it. Fine, leave. That's what it feels like. And no, I didn't find happiness or success immediately afterwards. I struggled for a number of years after that until I finally, oh, now I get it, so.
there are certain, even empirically, especially if you read, for example, Marcus Seligman's work, there are certain basics, almost in modern Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are certain basics I think people need to feel not in conflict with their own hopes. Or one of the things that we know people need are respect and friendship. I never thought I needed those things. I never thought I needed was success. Turns out I now have a very strong social network of respect among my peers and my betters, and it turns out that's incredibly rewarding. Who would have thought? But for me, to be in a college where I was literally disliked by the people that I thought were my own community, right? Your own people. It's one thing to have straight people not like you. They can't help it. But it's quite another thing to have your own people not like you. And for me, and maybe people would have been different, but there was an incredible amount of pain associated with that. Now, thankfully, I think because the gay rights struggle is in a different place, women are allowed to look a lot of different ways. You don't all have to have short hair or Doc Martens or anything hideous like that. And so it's a different world. But at that time, there was there was a lot of conflict. My hopes for my life would be in what the women were. Is an incredibly personal answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a response that exactly applies to that question, but I'll throw something out there. I mean, I think the general issue with what you're talking about is just, the inability to accurately predict exactly what the situation is going to be like ahead of time. I will say in relation to choosing jobs, I've found that, a mistake is to choose one that looks comfortable, totally comfortable based on the job description. You want to choose something that looks a little too hard because that's ultimately what you're going to grow into. And feel more comfortable with. So you want to choose things that are that seem a little bit out of your reach and work up to it rather than something that's totally comfortable. So I think that's an instance of just not being able to predict what it would be like.
Mark? I kind of want to make one small factual correction about the $60,000 figure, and then use that as a basis to ask you a question about money and success. I think you almost said it exactly right. The figure does come from Tom when you talk. You said it was a minimum. It's actually a maximum. After 60,000, there's a decouple of happiness and money.
You're right, Tom said that. Martin Seligman said it's a different figure. Martin Seligman said that we need a basis of $60,000 to not feel like we're struggling. But he agrees with that same premise, that after that $60,000, different figure, but yes.
Yeah, and Kahneman says it's one of the flattest relationships he's seen.
Right.
This is a guy who studies this sort of thing. So with that in mind, the research suggests that happiness and money decouple above 60,000. What's your reflection at this point and earlier in your educational career, and now at the point you are now, what's your reflection on the relationship between money and success? What do you need?
What do I need? It's pretty funny. When I was in undergrad, I was getting by on about $14,000 a year. So when I talk to lawyers who tell me you don't want to go into public interest, they only make 45. My eyes light up. That's just great. No, I think I would need enough to pay back these loans. I would probably need enough to retire later, own a modest house. I don't need a big deal beyond that.
I need N dollars. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, getting into specific numbers is silly, but at this point, I mean, money for me isn't really a major concern beyond covering yourself and having enough to plan and stuff like that. Otherwise, it's not really on my radar.
That's one of the big questions right now for me. You ask how much money do you need to what end, right? But after I left the firm I was working for before and took a step down so that I could have more happiness time, right? I guarantee you that I'm happy, right? But I hate the thought that there's someone out there that makes more money than me. And that's physically painful, right? I'm so competitive that the thought that I was making this, the highest that anybody's making, and now I'm making this, bothers me. That's why I'm talking about tempering the evaluative self. And you guys will go through this, especially if and when you start making an almost embarrassing salary for how poor many people are. I grew up poor. We were on those little tickets to go to the lunch line, right? The average partner at my last firm made $1.8 million a year. $9 million, I'm sorry, it's a little taggy talking about numbers, but lead partner made $9 million a year. You certainly don't need this much money, and I don't know that you need to give up your marriage, ever seeing your kids' soccer games, if you want those sort of things. It's a give and take. I will tell you that I've chosen to make less money so that we can go to the park on a Sunday and play volleyball with our friends, which I didn't have a single Sunday off at my old firm, right? So you just have to figure out that's empiricism, right? Tweak it. I make this amount of money. I never had a weekend. How's that feel? But I do think as long as you can pay for your retirement, and as long as you're covering the things you need, anything else does take away from happiness. Does take away from time you can spend doing other things.
Do you calculate how much each volleyball game costs?
And it's a lot of money.
I do have a number of friends in the Bay Area now. I try to explain to them why Sacramento is the greatest place on earth. And that 60,000 goes a whole lot further here than it does in the Bay Area. So those of you who are already accustomed to this place, stay here, all right?
Don't. It's worth it. Fantastic restaurants, interesting people.
You already like the pizza around here now where you're making, if the pizza doesn't get any worse just because you're earning more money, all right? Stay here.
Here.
So Sullivan and Kahneman both you mentioned other people working in similar sorts of fields in empirical psychology, like Jonathan Haidt and Dan Gilbert. One of the things that comes across in all of this research is how remarkably poor human beings are at anticipating what's going to make them happy. And so I'm curious if any of you have any sort of particular experiences of a library case where something that you didn't think would make you happy ended up making you incredibly happy, or something that you did think would make you happy, and when you achieved it, turned out actually didn't make you happy.
Mills College.
I don't know. I would need more time to reflect on that one.
Wrestling, actually. That's the only reason I went to school, towards the end of high school and early college. And then I'm at West Point Wrestling, and I realized I hate being thrown around. But it's weird because I still make that mistake and every now and then get back out there. And every single time I ask, why did I do that?
It happens all the time. I mean, you just have to you just have to pay attention to your system and tweak it. I thought that I'd be super happy at JK's care, right? All that stuff, but I think we need a lot more than we think we need. A broader range of experiences than we understand we need. When I was young, I thought all I need is a great body, a lot of money, and to date someone hot. I'm good. And it turns out I need not only a lot more than that, but a lot different than that. And I think you guys will, part of the fun is getting to figure out what turns you on. Part of the fun is getting to figure out what really makes you happy. And there's a lot out there.
Law school in general was something I planned, and it has made me very happy. So it does happen sometimes.
I guess the reason I'm having trouble answering that question is I guess probably because I'm just generally pessimistic. So I pretty much assume that things are not going to be fun, and then everything else is just crazy.
Great.
Some of you have experience at all three segments, calculus, public, post-secondary, education systems. And some of you have experience with, seems student. Those of you who been students in more than one part of the California public post-secondary education might comment on your experience from a kind of comparative point of view.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So you've been to community college, you've been to state, you've been to UC. You mind saying some things about how your experiences at community college, state, and UC have differed? Lots of other factors now in professional degree programs as opposed to undergraduate program, right, or upper division as opposed to lower.
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment on that. I definitely had an experience when I first showed up at Berkeley at being extremely disappointed with the quality of the exposition. I was just really surprised at how bad people were at lecturing compared to Sac State. You know, it's not. I still think it has a lot of great benefits, but you do kind of need to be prepared to. And I can only speak for like the math department, and you know, it's very narrow in scope, but it's hard to generalize that to the entire school. But you know, you need to be ready to pretty much be able to learn the material yourself, just from the books, and kind of just treat lectures as purely supplementary that you might get something from. Whereas I think here you have a much better chance of being able to rely on professors to actually present stuff in a way that's really accessible and useful. But you know, there's trade-offs with everything, and I think ultimately I was glad that I went because it provided access to material that I just didn't have here.
I think more and more I find that the law school isn't really indicative of what kind of law student you are or what kind of lawyer you're going to be, but it just says something about what kind of undergraduate student you were. And what undergrad you went to just says something about what kind of high school student you were. I really, you know, someone tells me they went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, and it just means nothing to me now anymore. I've noticed that at all levels, you just get whatever you put into it.
There's two parts to that question. You know, Mills isn't officially good college, and I felt as though many of my classes here were as rigorous, if not more rigorous, than many of my classes there. And I'm not, you know, I can't give me a grade anymore, so I'm not kissing his ass. Randy May's the best lecturer. He selects the best materials of any class I've ever been in. The reading materials, the stuff he chooses for you to read, it was like turning a water hose on. It just so good. But it's important when you're picking a graduate school. It's also it's important to think about to what end are you picking this school. There's a hierarchy bias, especially in the professional community, that's really real. My blunder half went to Yale, and I can guarantee you that if we go to a cocktail party, we go to Yale, she's assumed officially smart. But if the cocktail party extends to every job application, and actually she never has to apply for a job. They come get her, right? So when you're thinking about picking graduate schools, yes, there's one thing, think about your experience, but you also need to think about how the cachet of that choice on other people's judging selves in the real world.
I dated a girl that went to Harvard and works for Google now. And every single one of those social events, everybody was Ivy League. That's a very real thing. But you also kind of develop this other reputation, you know, when you go there and you're the only Sac State person. Sometimes people just feel more comfortable around you, or, you know, I don't know, they think you're more fun. Whether or not that's true, I don't know.
People think you're more fun because you're from here. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Is it Rachel? I would like to know if you are thinking or pondering of writing a book, because I think your journey is very inspirational, and I think a lot of people could benefit and learn from your journey.
It's a little hard to hear you encouraging her to write a book.
I'm asking if she's pondering the thought of writing a book. And she's got a broad experience in water.
Flattering. When I got sick, people suggested that I write a book, so that because of the rise from poverty and gain us to do the things that I already done. If I could find out some structured way to help other people do it, which I did work on a method while I was sick. I think if I got sick again, I certainly would do it. But I don't know that I have anything to offer right now, because if you look even at the broad range of lives and discussions that we've had, I don't know that we've offered any way to the people in this room to start thinking about their lives other than tangential, experiential connections. So if I could find some rigorous way to actually help other people achieve the things they want to achieve. Oh, damn, I'm doing it again. I was just about to say, but I think just reading a story about someone overcoming stuff is just kind of lame. But once again, there's that. Anyway, thank you, very sweet.
Russell?
Maybe if I could put all the sex and stuff in.
Actually, Charlize?
It's Rachel Lambie. I have a question. The story about your life. Do you really feel like your memory self actually got out of the driver's seat? Because like the experiences you had may have kind of modified the standards of, your evaluations of life. Do you feel like that may have occurred?
I understand your question. In other words, maybe the experiencing self is driving alongside the judging self because my experiences have formed my decisions and judgments.
And now basically you have new memories and new things to evaluate that you didn't have there.
I hope so. That's change and learning, right? I sure hope so. I mean, I sure hope if I saw you guys a couple years from now and you asked me what I was doing, I hope what I would say is I was making the same amount of money, but my girlfriend and I had gone to Greece, and we'd taken touring motorcycles across the country, and we had friends that we made dinner with, right? I hope that's what I'll say. Maybe, but there's a good chance if you see me in 2 years, what I'll say is, yeah, I just made partner, I'm making $1 million a year, and my girlfriend's left me. Real, right? Just kidding, Poopy. But I hope so, yes. I hope that I've learned that living in service of this judging voice that says, gotta do more, gotta be better. I hope I learned to shut her up.
What I'm basically saying is you were talking about how you were driven and how you were ambitious. Do you think that is still there? You just have modified what you're driven to do?
Yes.
In case you didn't hear Charlize's follow-up, what she says is, asked is, do you think that rather than extinguishing the sort of spirit of drive that you just learned to drive at different things?
I think it's all I can hope for anyway. I don't know if any of you guys out there have that voice, but yeah, maybe you just hope to aim it at different places.
You okay, Rachel, just being described as a driven person? I mean,
I think it's accurate.
yeah, okay. I mean,
I wouldn't be comfortable if someone said I was successful, right? But I would be comfortable if someone said.
Do John or Lance, do you think of yourselves as driven to succeed?
I think of myself as
Lazy. John's lazy.
I do see myself as driven to succeed. I like it.
And Rachel, would it be actually you feel like you're driven from within somehow, not by because we can talk about being driven from some kind of internal force, but also some of us are driven by the expectations of something that hasn't come up, right? The expectations. Well, actually, Lance addressed it of our parents or others, and that's another way. Where is it coming from with you, Lance?
It is coming in part from my parents, but that only supplements what I'm doing myself. There was a time where I rejected certain goals just because they came from my parents, and that's probably a part of growing up. But then once I adopted them for myself, then it gives me extra strength because it's in line with my parents and my community and those things.
One of the interesting points that was brought up in a talk yesterday was how the presence of another person who gives you acceptance and love almost unconditionally can really be a very important thing in someone's life, especially when they fail. I'm kind of curious about your opinions really about how acceptance and love from another person played any role either in making you less motivated to succeed, like, I already got my acceptance and love, why do I have to work harder to succeed? And how it might have encouraged you to, be more persistent in trying to succeed at something. That's kind of an open-ended question.
Is that a religious question, Professor?
It could be taken that way. I'm asking it in an open-ended way so that it includes the example from yesterday, which was a non-religious context, where I think it was Nathaniel Hawthorne's wife said that she loved him and basically had a very supportive response to his failure at a given point. But it's open-ended enough to include a religious view as well.
This question is actually really important to me, I think useful in a way. My father is the handsome short guy sitting next to Allie right there. And he's not I wasn't born to him. It's not my biological father. Actually, I'd be born to my mother, but you get the idea. I had sort of absentee landlords. My parents were doing their own thing. And about 14 years ago, this man became my father. And a drastic change in me and the way I moved through the world, just drastic. And I think that it's critical when we're making our choices about child rearing or what sort of institutions, gay marriage, we're going to support. It's really important to think about the stabilizing effect of love and nurturing and consistency in people's lives, in my opinion.
I don't think for me that has really changed, like my sense of what I want to accomplish or what I want to do, planning in general or something like that. But I think that kind of love and acceptance definitely helps on an emotional front. I was not in any relationships in high school or college, and I was definitely lonely and depressed and had social issues because of that, and that has pretty much been eliminated now that I'm in a relationship. So I think it can help eliminate that kind of noise that might actually just be impacting you in other ways. But in terms of that itself influencing like what I want to do for a career or this or that, I wouldn't say it's impacting me that way.
I think. It goes both ways, probably. I think you mentioned unconditional. I think there have been times where I took things for granted. People in my life, like if I could do whatever, they'll still be okay with it. But those also were the people who meant a lot to me in the long run. Like my parents, or I asked if this was a religious question. I think wanting to do right by my parents' expectations, also wanting to. Mom would probably be glad to hear this. Wanting to do what's right with the Lord, right? Those things, they do kind of give. I don't know, added support for when things are difficult. I think they give me an extra incentive to try hard.
I have a question while they're thinking. There's actually a lot of books written nowadays about how we tend to exaggerate exaggerate our own influence over our future, and that we tend to play down the effects of luck, especially, it was mentioned yesterday, especially with respect to achievements. But how do you guys, when you're looking back, how do you guys sort of understand randomness in your life? What sorts of things happen to you that maybe were turned out to be incredibly important, either bad or good, but which were really just luck? Or do you look at the things that other people might say are just bad luck and say no, that they were meant to be, or they had to be this way? Part of that diversion, something Carol has.
The three most important events in my life have all been the result of random. I personally believe that life's incredibly random. I used to do the search for recovery of tissue transplant, and we would be called, you'd get a phone call, and some woman had just lost her 13-year-old kid, some stupid thing, and I was always cutting parts of the 13-year-olds and putting parts into 70-year-olds for no reason. And I know, I'm sorry, it's a bias, and all respect to people that have religion, but I believe life is totally random, and you learn to capitalize on it. But one example is, and assuming success takes something broader than just monetary success, but I think you can apply it, maybe success in relationships. Ellie and I met in Ixtapa, Mexico. We met in the southern tip of Mexico. We were both there on vacation. We met, it turned out her house was 2 blocks from my office. Some people, because, and you guys wouldn't know this yourself, I take my word for it, we're just the greatest couple in the world. And some people that meet us think, okay, God intended for you two to be together. That's why you did that. I don't know. All I know is it was the most amazing opportunity of my life. I believe it was random, and I grabbed it. And I think that's really important. Meeting my father, literally random. Cancer, random. In my opinion, these are monumental events, and the 3 biggest in my life. You just have to figure out what do you do once it goes crazy, wrong or right. What are you gonna do?
I'm actually a determinist. Sorry, Dr. Bellin. No, I really think, my internal motivations aren't of my making. So yeah, whatever successes I have, I owe it to whatever put the sequence in motion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, one of the just underlying, random things that has had an influence on me, I guess, is, being born to the family that I was born into. I think my parents' approach of being, like I kind of mentioned in my talk, they're very laid back. They never really imposed, standards of theirs on me in terms of what I was going to do, or anything like that. And I think that was really important to me to kind of really take ownership of my own stuff and just figure out what I'm going to do. And they pretty much, they were very supportive, but they didn't direct. And that's just chance. I mean, I could have been born to completely different circumstances.
First, in fact, some piece about the other two, about the issue of comparative success. Do you frequently find yourself comparing how successful you are to the people around you, or how do you respond when you meet someone who's in your field who is more successful than you? I'm curious what your emotions, your thoughts, your reactions are in circumstances like that.
It's if I'm comparing, it's only with a specific end in mind, not happiness, not success generally. So if I find people who have better grades than me or something, yeah, they might do better at getting the prestigious firm job. But maybe I don't want that job anyways, or maybe I'm just going to enjoy myself more in law school anyways. So I think comparison is just meaningless unless you have a fixed end in mind already.
Was that question directed at you? Sorry, so I thought it wasn't directed at me, so what was it?
About you should compare. Rich said, it really gets her that she knows someone out there making more money, and that's something obviously she started working on. I'm curious if you have a similar problem, or if you have any tool, maybe advice for her, anything like that at all, or the rest of us?
Well, no, I'm sure that I do. You know, if you're faced with somebody that's a lot more successful than you, I mean, I think you can always. I probably don't go into competitive mode as much as like I'm more inclined to the discussion mode than the competitive mode. But I think that's one of those things you just have to learn from and see what you can take from it that's good. In other words, it's okay that you might be a little bit miserable having to be around somebody who's doing a lot better than you, but try to find a way to turn it into something that you can benefit from, learn from, improve yourself. You know, as opposed to just completely going into this sort of nihilist, you know, like, well, I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I'll mention one thing that's just totally kind of random in that regard, but like juggling is something that I do as a hobby, and so, you know, I can do a certain amount of stuff, but you can always find people who are, you know, half your age that can do 10 times more, and I think at that, you know, juncture you can say, okay, I should just retire from this, like I shouldn't do this anymore, there's no reason, or, you know, hey, maybe I can learn from that and improve myself in some way. But it's not pleasurable.
My significant other, I'm sorry, I'm gonna embarrass you. My significant other skied for the United States Olympic team. She went to Yale and she makes twice the amount of money I do. So I feel like a loser 24 hours a day. Kidding. I think that you have to know which demons to feed. My grandma used to say we have 2 dogs inside us, and the one we feed grows. You have to figure out which dog you want to feed, and that's probably not a good one to feed.
Okay.
A number of things that each of you has said already bear on this, but I think it's not come out explicitly. It seems to me that there's generally a tension between security and authenticity. So I was wondering if each of you would speak more explicitly about what you see as the appropriate trade-offs between security and authenticity.
I guess I would need you to define security and authenticity.
I'm very tempted to do that. Let me try and persist upon this. So, oftentimes what it is that we need to do to maintain kind of material well-being and physical well-being, getting the money we need, getting the medication we need, having stable relationships, social relationships, pulls in one direction, and doing what we love pulls in another. And this isn't inevitably the case, but it seems it's true of many folks, and it's true of everyone to some extent. Would you mind speaking about what you see as the proper way to navigate the conflict between security and doing what you love when such conflicts arise for you?
I think a lot of times that tension goes away, actually, just the more I think about it. You know, things I love. One thing I came to do in the philosophy department is regard the future as real. There are these real things in the future that I really love. And sometimes I just have to keep that in mind. And I just end up, and those things are more closely related to security. And those are the things that I'll end up gravitating towards instead of, you know, these present day authentic desires now.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of one to ask for definitions too. I like definitions. But, yeah, I mean, security, if we're talking about just like, you know, basic means, I mean, is obviously fundamental. You know, I mean, whatever you're doing, if you don't have that, then you can't do what you want to do. But I think aside from that, if we're talking about sort of material things that go beyond that, at this point in my life, I'm definitely much more leaning towards finding something that's interesting and fulfilling, and secondarily worrying about material things.
If you don't mind my following up, do you think that will continue to be the case, or do you think that's, so to speak, the luxury gift?
Could be a luxury. You know, I mean, situations change, and I think you have to practically evaluate that depending on where you are. But I'm going to try to, you know, fight for finding something that I really want to do before I sort of resign to something that isn't what I want to do.
I don't have a conflict. My athletic self is a materialistic self. And I think it's tough. I get concerned when I try to mentor young people and they are searching for what they love to do. I think that's a problematic quest. I think you do stuff and then you tweak it. Also, when I walked in, Professor Anderson asked me what I was doing, and I said that I was an attorney, and he said, "Oh, for money or for good?" I don't think he knew how insulting he was being, but I don't believe personally that my avenue of doing good is in my career. I certainly do good in my community, but I enjoy being a lawyer. And I think that's a blessing to find work that you love and they're one and the same. But we all notice I had to try a lot of things first. But if I tried to sit back and navel gaze and think about what I'd be passionate about and then wait to find that thing, as a young person, I would have been in trouble. I think you just try stuff. And if it feels authentic and however you define that term, great. And if it doesn't, wait a year because it looks bad on your resume and then try something else.
Or just don't
don't tell it to me.
One of my uncles gave me some pretty good advice about that, though. He was a musician when he was young and didn't want to work. All he wanted to do was play his guitar. And then he got to an age where he had 4 kids and had struggled with feeding them. And he still just hated work. And he told me that it's probably a myth that people out there, that everybody is going to find an occupation that they'll like. And he said, the reality is some people just aren't going to like work because it's work. So since you're not going to find a job you like anyways, you might as well go for the one that pays. It was good advice, I thought.
I'd like to follow up on Rachel's comments related to her journal, because it really sounded interesting to me that you have a structured approach to writing down like journal entries. I take it so that you can look back on them and really get a lot of information about what you were thinking then. And I'd like to know how you see that practice of yours relating to the remembering self that you referred to before.
I've kept the journal since I was 8, fairly religiously, and it is a practical application. So I write on one side and I leave the other side blank, and then I go back in a regular fashion and review. And the hope is that I personally don't believe we know this is who we are or what will make us happy, or I think we have to observe the self. I don't think that I have any more access, other than reflecting on my experiences, which is what the journal is. I don't think I have any more access to what will make me happy or feel rewarded or what I'll like than John has access to those things about me. So one of the things that really helps me is to document in a structured way my life and then go back. So it helped for me. It's helped considerably. One of the things that are interesting is I'll be in the moment, and I'll feel like what I'm doing isn't working. I'm not happy with what I'm doing, judging. And then I'll look back on a period of a month, and that same experience, I've often registered positive feelings about that same experience. But just in that moment, it doesn't feel good. And people can make decisions in that moment instead of looking at the cumulative effects of the moments of doing that exact same activity So it just helps me, I hope, make better decisions and get to know myself a little better.
One other thing that I find myself thinking about in regard to all of your responses is our tendency to exaggerate the significance of things that happen to us. And I'm not saying, Rachel, that you were exaggerating, but the one that springs to mind is that you have a narrative of your life that doesn't begin, but a very important part of it was your experience at Mills. And I have a daughter in college right now. She's at Berkeley in first year, and she loves it. And it's very clear to me that the reason she loves it is because she's made 3 good friends. She loves Berkeley, and then but it seems to me that that's the center. She connected with some people very quickly, and that's the luck thing. But also there's this tendency to really, exaggerate the significance of small things that could, maybe easily be corrected. So I think about your experience, and I wonder, well, you've sort of got this Mills is iconic to you right now in a way, but what if you had met 1 or 2 people who actually were just great people who you liked? That's luck, but it could also have been something that maybe with a different sort of attitude you could have achieved. And so I guess my question is, to what extent do any of you see things that happen to you as possibly the result of just neglecting really simple things you could have done to make things better? Because a lot of students just, there's a magic, right? Like some things just happen, whether it's just working hard on an exam or something, we tend to think magic dust needs to be sprinkled. But really there's simple things that we can do that if we just weren't exaggerating the significance of what's happening to us, we might be able to have done better. Does any of that connect to any of your experiences?
You might, it's causation versus correlation. You might be downplaying the importance of friendship in your daughter's life, or she might not be exaggerating the experience at all. That would be consistent with what Martin Seligman has said. But I do think this gets back to a subtheme of what we've been talking about today, and that is how do you make decisions into service of whatever you want. And you're absolutely right. If I'd had a couple of friends or a professor or anyone in that point where I could have checked my own decision making with, I probably wouldn't have left. Someone could have talked me down and said, hey, wait a minute, give it a year, cut your hair short, I don't know, something. But that's why I think all of us, and journals, and loved ones, and parents, and friends, it's important to check our thought process. When we just, in my experience, when I just run off and make a decision without checking with anybody, it's often a bad decision.
I'm really still thinking about that one too. I think it has been a mistake, though, for me to make so many decisions on my own early on.
You mean contrary to advice? Or?
Yeah, contrary to advice.
I'm sure I could have made minor tweaks in high school that would have drastically changed the outcome of that, but I don't know. It doesn't really keep me up at night.
Yes?
Well, I wanted to go back to Rachel's comment, and I feel like...
Your voice is just barely penetrating up into
Okay, I wanted to go back to Rachel's comment, and I've been writing journals since I was 6th grade, and I can relate some experience to what you're saying, and this is not a question, but then I wanted to kind of engage that idea, and we all have different experience, and we can learn so many things from that one experience, but then I think throughout life we change our value, and that's why when we're focusing on one value, we're experiencing from one thing, and we completely missed a whole bunch other thing we can possibly learn, and then we're only learning from one angle and then move on. But if you write in journal and then you're going back, and then you might have at the time different value, and then you catch things and I don't know, correct yourself or improve from that point. So, you know, what you're asking that your daughter, you know, is having fun and, you know, having good experience because the friendship, and maybe that is her value right now, and that's what she wants to focus. But then she is also learning some valuable stuff at that moment, you know. I don't know, just connected to the question.
Thank you. Do you have any follow-up on that? Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? We're actually going to pull this in for a landing now, so I think we have time for one more. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. There's a tradition here, actually, of the, we usually have a student panel. Most of you know this. This is the first time we've done an alumni panel, but they have kept up the tradition of completely stealing the show. It's always the best panel. I think there's just no question that that's been, not that we haven't had some excellent panels already. I don't mean to discourage our professors. We have one more. It's at 1:30, and I hope you guys can come. I think it's going to be also very good, and that will be the concluding panel for the Nammour Symposium. Would you please join me in really giving rousing applause to these fine people.